Five. Okay, we're going to be learning a Sicha of the Rebbe from a talk of the Rebbe from 1963. Shabbos, like the Shabbos Shemos, that year was Mevorchim, blessing the month of Shvat. This year it's not. We're a little behind in the time because of the leap year. And it was also that year was Shnas Hakan, the 150 years of the yard of the yahrzeit of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe's yahrzeit is on the 24th of Tevis. That Shabbos was the 23rd of Tevis, and the Rebbe verbringed on Shabbos, which is the Sicha we're going to learn. And then the Rebbe also verbringed on Saturday night, Moshe Shabbos, and Sunday night for the yahrzeit of the Alter Rebbe. So now we're going to start. We've learned before the Farbrengens of the yahrzeit, and now we're starting the Farbrengen of Shabbos Mevorchim Shvat Shemos, 23rd of Tevis, 1963, Tavshin Chav Gimel. So the Rebbe says like this: Ala Pasuk. This is on this week's parsha. Ala Pasuk, on the verse of this week's parsha. Moshe Hayaraya. Moshe was a shepherd, right? Moshe was the shepherd by his father-in-law Yisrael. Isa b'medrash. The medrash teaches us like this. Kol mi shekasa by Haya, whenever it refers to someone in the Torah that so and so Haya was, what does it mean that he or she was? So the Medrash says Mesukan Lakach. This was something that person was ready for. Mesukan from the word Tikkun, was ready for it. Was made out. You were born to this. Already from the beginning, that Moshe should be a shepherd. That means Moshe's ability to be a shepherd wasn't just that he happened to marry Yisro and he needed a job, so he gave him a job as a shepherd. That's what he was built for. Mitchilas Briyasam, from the beginning of their creation, anyone who says Haya is Nisaknu Lakach. They were established that that's what their job is. That's what they would be. So Liya Yisrael, to be a shepherd for the Jewish people. Like Moshe was one of the shepherds, one of the 7 shepherds. He wasn't just any of the shepherds, he was the faithful shepherd. The head of the 7 shepherds. So we have 7 shepherds, not in time, but in level. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, and David. So the head, the main of the shepherds, the Rai Mehemna, the faithful shepherd, is Moshe. And because it says Moshe Haya Roya, he was a shepherd. Haya is that he was built for this. He was born into this. We find another medrash that says like this: Haya Tzadik Yivchan, Hashem Tzadik Yivchan. God tests the righteous. Ubamahu Boichnai, and what was he tested in? Bimaret Zayin, in being a shepherd. Means that the medrash is referring to Moshe. That God tests Yivchan from the word Boichan. He tests the righteous. And what does he test him in? He tests him in how he would be a shepherd. First, he had to be a shepherd of tzayin, of sheep. And after he was a shepherd of sheep, did he get upgraded to the job as being a shepherd for the Jewish people? Badak David b'tzayin. When God wanted to check King David, he checked him with sheep. David was also a shepherd, right? When he sees that he is a good shepherd, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, so God says, Mishu Yadei Liras Tzayin Ish. A person who's able to be a good shepherd, to watch each sheep according to its needs, let him come and be a shepherd of my people. This is what the verse says: that afterwards he brought him to be the shepherd of Yaakov, his people. So that's about David. So David was a good shepherd, therefore he's the first Rishon, he's the first king, he's the Melech Rishon. Moshe Rabbeinu, the Medrash says also, first God wanted to see how he would be as a shepherd, meaning an actual shepherd of the sheep. I see you have the compassion for the sheep. I see the compassion you have to be a shepherd of flesh and blood, meaning a shepherd of Yisrael. So chayecha is an expression of like a shvua, of a promise. I promise you could be the shepherd for my people Yisrael. So this is the medrash. The medrash is basically saying is that Moshe Rabbeinu was tested in his ability to be a shepherd like David. L'chura, the Rebbe says seemingly, Lefi divrei medrash, sheMoshe haya mesuken lekach mitchilas briyasai. Based on this idea that Moshe was the first medrash that says that he was Moshe Hayirah, he was supposed to be, he was built to be a shepherd from the beginning of time. Why did he have to be tested? It means if you're saying that he needed to grow into the job, we needed to see if he was able. So then you have to test him. But Moshe, the very fact that the first medrash says that Moshe Hayirah, he was a shepherd, is a sign that he was built for that. So why do you have to test him? So we must conclude that the fact that God still needs to test Moshe Rabbeinu, even though he was built for that. So therefore we have to say Shehei Midrash is Chalukah, seemingly that the two separate midrashim. One medrash says that Moshe needed to be tested, and the other medrash says that Moshe was built for it. But according to the first medrash, that Moshe was made to be a shepherd, so therefore in theory he should not have to been tested. So why did he have to be a shepherd? Means the second medrash says that the fact that he was a shepherd of Yisrael is God was testing him. Okay, but that medrash may not agree with the first medrash. Medrashim don't have to agree with each other. So the first medrash says the Moshe Raya means he was made for this, so he wouldn't have to be he wouldn't have to be tested because that's his DNA. That's what he's built for. And the second medrash says he had to be tested like David. But even according to the first medrash, no one disagrees that he was a shepherd. So why was he a shepherd? Why did Moshe have to be a shepherd if he wasn't being tested in that? He wasn't a shepherd for a short period of time. It was a long period of time that he was a shepherd. For almost as long as he was a shepherd for the Jewish people, he was a shepherd for Yisrael. The Gamla Das HaMedrash, and even according to the Medrash, that God did test him, according to the second Medrash, that doesn't necessarily agree with the first Medrash, that he was built for that. And moving also is a question. He could be a shepherd for a year, 6 months. Why do you have to be a shepherd for so many years? 40 years he was a shepherd. He was 40 years in the desert, and he was 40 years in Midian for Yisrael. To see in order to test him, we could see in a short period of time how if he's sensitive or not, if he's up for the job. Doesn't have to be a 40-year test. Why do we have to test him for 40 years? So another question that I says, if for whatever reason Moshe has to be a shepherd, we find that not only Moshe, but the fathers were shepherds their whole life. Who said he had to be an employee? Why couldn't he be his own shepherd? Why couldn't Hashem make it? The Moshe should have started a business in Egypt or in Midian and had his like the fathers. He was a shepherd on his own. Even Yaakov worked for Lavan. Eventually, he was a shepherd for himself. He worked for himself. Or someone else. Why specifically Yisrael? Kohen Midian. Who's Yisrael? He's the priest of Midian. He wasn't such a nice yichus at the time before Yisrael was converted. He wasn't just a priest; he was a priest of Avodah Zarah. Why does Moshe to be tested or not be tested? Why does he have to be a shepherd by a priest of Avodah Zarah, of idol worship? And also we need to understand what is the lesson to us that Moshe was a shepherd. In our own lives, each one as an individual. It's known what the Alter Rebbe writes, who that year, 1963, Baal Hailula Dechav Dal Tevis, the person who were celebrating his yahrzeit, we're remembering his yahrzeit of the 24th of Tevis coming up in about 10 days, 7 days, and also that year it was the yahrzeit for 150 years. With Sefer Tanya, what the Alter Rebbe says in the Tanya, Bir Maimer Zal explaining the words of Chazal that says, in the Gabi Moshe Milsa Zucherhi, that when the Gemara asks about, Moshe says, Moshe says, what does God want from us? He just wants us to fear him. So the Gemara says, is fear such an easy thing that Moshe says, what already does God want? So the Gemara says, yes. The Gabi Moshe, for Moshe, it's something simple. but we're not Moshe. Shekol nefesh, so the Alter Rebbe explains. Shekol nefesh v'nefesh v'beis Yisrael yesh b'chinas Moshe Rabbeinu alav Hashem. From this Gemara, we see that if Moshe Rabbeinu is talking to the Jews and saying that there's a level of simplicity in finding fear, and the Gemara says, yes, for Moshe it is simple, it's easy. So, but what's that have to do with us? It means that we have that part of us, of Moshe in us, where we could tap into that milsa zutra, to that easiness, to that it's an accepted thing that we should fear God. So from this is understood that just like we have a part of us that's from Moshe Rabbeinu, an Efi person, the Rebbe Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya. So it's understood. Means that we have within us a spark of Moshe, and if we have within us a spark of Moshe, just like we have the ability to achieve fear of God in a simple way, so too we have to be able to have an ability to have the concept of Moshe HaYirayah. Moshe was a shepherd. Means the idea of Moshe HaYirayah. So from just to summarize the Rebbe's questions up until this point, the Rebbe brings two madrashim. The first medrash Hayariel, the first medrash that says Moshe was built to be a shepherd. The second medrash that says Moshe was tested by being a shepherd. So the Rebbe asks, it seems a contradiction. If he's built, he doesn't need to be tested. And also, why does he have to be a shepherd so long? And why does he have to be Yisro's shepherd? Right. So if he has to be a shepherd, he could be his own shepherd, right? So we're trying to figure out, what does it mean Moshe HaYirayah, and he's specifically a shepherd for Yisro, and what does this mean with it for ourselves? Because if we're just talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, you say, okay, that's Moshe, he's the leader. What's it have to do with me? Because we have a spark of Moshe within us means there's a concept of that leadership, of that concept that Moshe was a shepherd in each and every one of us. Okay, so the Rebbe continues. Vabir B'zeh, the idea is like this. In Yonah Shel Royat Tzayin, what does it mean to be a shepherd? Shnoisen Litzayin is kol hatzarech lehem. The job of a shepherd is to give and provide for the sheep everything they need. They rely on the shepherd for their safety and care. V'lo rak hamuchach lehem, not only necessities, survival, lechem tsar u'mayim lachatz, a little bit of bread, a little bit of water, just to live. The job of the shepherd is to make life easy for the sheep, the easiest way for the sheep to continue doing what they have to do. And a shepherd, a true shepherd, like we see in Moshe Rabbeinu, is committed to every single sheep on its level. He or she, what she needs or he needs, the shepherd is committed to their needs specifically. The famous medrash, when it talks about how Moshe was tested. How Moshe was a shepherd. The Medrash tells us how he fed them. He fed the elder sheep that had weak jaws, the softer grass. The younger sheep, he fed them with the more severe, the hard grass. The small chevra he took care of. He was very specific. He knew how to take care of each sheep, what they needed. So he says like this, he continues, Peter, so Baal Shem Tov will understand this based on the teaching of the holy Baal Shem Tov. So what does the Baal Shem Tov say? This is a very famous idea. Shebetzayin Yisroi, that these weren't just any sheep. Yisro's sheep weren't just any sheep. Not that any sheep is just any sheep, but specifically Yisro's sheep weren't just any sheep. The Baal Shem Tov teaches us that the sheep of Yisro, Nizgalgu Nishmais Yisrael, Sha'achach Nosal Moshe Satayra. These sheep were the souls of the Jewish people that were born later, that ended up receiving the Torah. The generation of the desert were first were in a Gilgul, in a carnation in these sheep. So he was really taking care of the same chevra. The same people he later dealt with in the desert is the same sheep he was dealing with in Yisro and Midian. So the Baal Shem Tov says, Shebetzayin Yisro is Galgul Nishmos Yisrael Sha'achach Nasan LaMoshe Satayra V'Nasa Talmidov. These are the same sheep that later became the students of Moshe, the same souls. Nimsa, so it turns out, Shebis Askus Shal Moshe B'Marit Zayin. It wasn't just a job that Moshe had, a side gig to test his ability to be a shepherd or to be caring. But these were actually he was providing for the Jewish people at that point, because those sheep had the souls of the Jewish people. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu was taking care of the physical needs of the sheep, so too he was making sure that eventually the physical needs of the Jewish people will be taken care of.
Well, doesn't that kind of imply that the Jewish people came from a lower animal form?
Sheep as opposed to?
Animals as opposed to humans, that they were reincarnated. The humans were reincarnated from animals. Behemoths.
But there's a uniqueness in animals. They have bittul, especially sheep have the level of bittul. The Rebbe is going to going to explain this, but there's a level of bittul. Sheep have a specific level of self-nullification.
But they're animals. They're the kind of animal. Yeah.
I know, but there's a uniqueness to the sheep, to the animals that have a higher soul that we learned it many times in Torah. How is it that we sustain ourselves from animals?
Why couldn't they have been reincarnated from other previous human beings?
Let's see what the Rebbe explains. I think they needed to have the commitment of the sheep that they wouldn't have been able to have in other people. So the Rebbe says this, and this interaction, hashpa, this flow that Moshe provided for the sheep at those 40 years before he took them out of Egypt, was a preparation. The spiritual needs that he was going to take care of them. That he's going to give them once he gave the Torah. So first he had to have mamish. It means the sheep were totally, he wasn't giving them a shear. He wasn't teaching the sheep Torah. He was taking care of them physically. First Moshe took care of them physically, and then he provided for us spiritually as well as physically also in the desert. Only through that experience were we able to be worthy of accepting the Torah. And that's why it had to be 40 years. It wasn't just a test to see, okay, Moshe, you're good for the job, you passed the test. He needed the equal amount of time, the 40 years that they were in the desert, to be to the equal time that he took care of them in a different form, in the form of sheep, in the flock of Yisrael. Aderech Ma'am Razal, as it says, it takes 40 years to really get to the depth of your teacher's thinking. And he needed that 40-year experience of relationship with the Neshamas Yisrael, even though it was in the form of sheep, in order for them to have that relationship and build on that relationship to be able to make them ready for receiving the Torah. Okay.
The emphasis is obviously on how good he is, not that the people came from other people, but they came from.
I don't know if the Rebbe says this, because I was listening to a talk of Fabrengen, of someone who was at this Fabrengen, who was telling us the story of this Fabrengen. But I think there was a tzaddik who once said, based on the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, that the souls of the Jewish people are the reincarnation of the sheep, and he took care of them.
Maybe that wasn't so good in the Holocaust. It didn't work out too well.
So he said, I was the sheep that ran away. This says the famous story, Moshe was chasing a sheep. But the Rebbe points out, the Rebbe is teaching us something here. It's not just the story of what happened to Moshe. At first, Moshe took care of their material, physical needs, and only then did he give them the Torah. So this idea, the Rebbe says, that first, lehetiv l'Yisrael, first you have to do acts of kindness, material, physical, begashmis, and only afterwards you start caring about a person's spiritual needs. That's not just unique to Moshe. All shepherds had this quality. All the extensions of Moshe in every generation. We know that the Zohar teaches that every leader of the generation is the Moshe of the generation. And we find that one of the qualities of leadership is first to make sure that the Chassidim, the Talmidim, the Jewish people that are the flock of the shepherd have their material needs, like Moshe took care of their material needs, and then to take care of the spiritual needs. Yedua, it's known, the Rebbe says. The Rebbe spoke about this very much in that Fabrengen. That one of the things the Baal Shem Tov was able to establish by his chevra, the Baal Shem Tov was a member and then I think the head of the hidden tzaddikim before he revealed himself to be the leader of Chassidus and to introduce the teachings of Chassidus. So the Rebbe says it's known that the Baal Shem Tov was able to affect by his friends, his colleagues of tzaddikim hanistarm, the hidden tzaddikim, say there's this idea. They would have, it wasn't just that you had hidden tzaddikim that just were these righteous people. There were people with a plan, they had meetings, they had conventions, and they would have votes of what is an approach they should take as hidden tzaddikim. And it was the Baal Shem Tov who suggested to send out teams of tzaddikim all over in disguise to help first material and to help spiritual. And that was an idea of the Baal Shem Tov, and he was able to get them to accept that strategy. That first we help the people material, and then you can help them spiritual. It's also known, the Rebbe says, when it comes to the Alter Rebbe, with regard to the Alter Rebbe. Shakasher hoya etzla inin shleimus ha'adam, adei inin hanistuin. When he completed himself, when he got married young to a very fine woman. Is yichud dechar v'nukva, when he had his unification of male and female. His first thing he did, his first act of action he did when he got married, he made a condition with his father-in-law that his dowry that he got, his money that he got on for in the marriage, his father-in-law shouldn't try to involve himself in what he should do, how he should spend or invest his money. He should be able to do with his nedunya, with his money, with his dowry, whatever he wants. He doesn't want his father-in-law's advice. That was a condition before he got married. And what did he do with the money? He took the money and he dedicated it la'azir, to help, to help people, to help poor people physically. He set up different kind of funds with his money to help the poor. This is not even after he was influenced by his teacher, the Holy Magid, meaning after he came to Chassidus, even before he went to the Magid. He went to the Magid after he got married. But before he even went to the Magid, he understood that the money, if he had money, he wanted to put it towards helping the poor. And only later did he become a spiritual leader, a spiritual shepherd. But first, before he even became a student of the Magid, he took the monies that he had to help others. That he only later did he open up the eyes of the Jewish people through the two lights, Gali the Torah, the hidden parts of Torah. We know the Alter Rebbe was a giant in the revealed parts of Torah. I mean, he's the author of the Shulchan Aruch. Pnimis Torah, in the hidden parts of Torah, the Tanya, etc. of Chassidus. Shem Shulchan Aruch v'Tanya. His main works are the Shulchan Aruch and the Tanya. And when it comes to teaching Torah, it itself had a seder, had an order. The Alter Rebbe was a very musuder, was very organized. Even though when it comes to print, the Tanya was printed before the Shulchan Aruch. There's a section of the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch known as the Laws of Talmud Torah. It's a famous work of the Alter Rebbe. Even the Gra, when he saw it, didn't know who the author was. It was floored by the work of the Alter Rebbe on Talmud Torah. And he published that work, which has to do with chinuch, the education, before he published the Tanya. And the Rebbe says, although we're talking about leaders, now the Rebbe says, what's this mean to us as individuals? This approach, this idea, is what Hashem wants from every single Jewish person. The Rebbe says to start. Who could say Asher Arv Liba Legeshes Lahazik Afilu Chelek Echad Mini Elef Madregas Rabbeinu Zaken? The Rebbe says, who is a person who could even begin to say and approach that they understand 1,000th of who the Alter Rebbe was? And this is the Rebbe's talking, and he's a grandson of the Alter Rebbe, and he's the Rebbe. Alpha became nevertheless. But the fact is that there's an extension of Moshe Rabbeinu in every single one of us, like we said before. That if Moshe says, yes, it's easy to fear God, is because you have within him that ability. Therefore, we could demand from everyone to behave in this way. I mean, the person may say, well, that's what the Alter Rebbe did. You want me to compare me to the Alter Rebbe who took all his wedding money and put it towards the poor and then spent his life teaching Torah? That's the Alter Rebbe. What's that have to do with me? The Rebbe says, no. The very fact that there's a spark of motion in every person means everyone can live up to that level. A person shouldn't try to think to themselves, why is it so important to me what's going on in someone else's life? No, that shouldn't be your approach. Your approach should be to be close and show love to another Jew. And the first thing, when you have to know how do you approach a person to show care and actually help a person, not just showing care, but actually help a person, is first to help a person with gashmis material, and then you start working on that person to help them in their journey in ruchnis and spiritual. That's one thing. Is another idea that Rebbe says. About the question, why that only answers why Moshe Rabbeinu had to deal with sheep for 40 years. But why did it have to be Yisro's sheep? Why couldn't it be his sheep? The Hemshech Habir, the Rebbe, they say, Shavoidis Moshe b'mar son Yisroi hois levaris and netzutzis. Chayle dikdusha shahayu eitzel koi midyan shayakomer avodah. So here the Rebbe ended up saying another talk to continue to explain why it had to be Yisro's sheep, because there's this the idea of to elevate the sparks that fell as far as being Yisro, who was a komer, a priest of avodah zarah. V'zeu gam inyan hanachas tevis Moshe. V'zeu gam inyan hanachas tevis Moshe bir avodah zarah shel Mitzrayim. That's the whole idea. Moshe also had to elevate the avodah zarah of Mitzrayim. Lachem shenisbalta de'shiyarda baspar lichot migilule beis avi. He also had an effect on Batya when she went to rescue him. She was also getting rid of her father's avodah zarah. And the rest of this talk is published that you don't put into the Sikha in the Likutei Sichas volume 16, page 13 and on. So they're not going to, in this publication, they don't explain that part. And the Rebbe is like this. The Rebbe continues. The idea is like this. What does it mean that Moshe was a shepherd of the Jewish people? So the Rebbe continues, in this Bar Li'il, we said, that we said before, we spoke that Moshe Rabbeinu provided first material, and that was a preparation to provide spiritual. First, he took care of the sheep of Yisrael, which were the souls of the Jewish people, and then he gave them the actual Torah later. And because at the time when the Jewish people had to receive the Torah, there were kitragim, there were voices in heaven who said, "What's going on? What's so special about the Jewish people? The Egyptians serve idols. The Jews weren't that much better. Why are the Jews any better than the idol worshippers?" That's what they said by the splitting of the Red Sea. But nevertheless, Moshe Rabbeinu was the shepherd of the Jewish people. Even in a situation where there's a voices in heaven that could say, "What's so special about the Jews?" So Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't say, "Okay, that's a good question. I only deal with quality Jews." No, Moshe Rabbeinu deals with even a situation, even the Jews that the angels are questioning God. First, he was a shepherd by Yisrael, who was himself a priest to idols. So you would think that Moshe Rabbeinu would say, "Why am I caring for an idol worshipper's sheep?" No, because he took care of them, notwithstanding of that they were sheep of an idol worshipper. And this affected him, not just what he did to others. Later, when Moshe Rabbeinu stood before by the splitting of the Red Sea and by Matan Torah, and he knew of the voices in heaven that were saying, "What's so special about the Jewish people?" He didn't care. Just like he didn't care about the sheep of Yisrael, that Yisrael was the owner of the sheep and he was an idol worshiper. So too, he didn't care about the Jewish people and the voices that said, "They're not worthy. I don't care what you argue." Moshe doesn't pay attention to that argument. And he commits himself to give them the Torah, notwithstanding of all the ideas and voices that are questioning it. The Rebbe says continues. We had Moshe himself get saved. He got saved. This is obviously a continuation of the published Sikha that he didn't include, so it's kind of a little cryptic. But he says that Moshe himself was saved by the river. The river was itself an avodah zarah. That was an idol of Egypt. In order for Moshe to be saved, it had to be no longer an idol. And this empowered Moshe. That he doesn't look at a quality Jew, he looks at a Jew. And every Jew has quality, no matter what. Even if there's voices that says this is an idol worshiper, whether it's an actual idol or the idea of an idol. Even if people are going to say, "What's so special about these people?" Right? It says that the people serve avodah zarah today in a different way. It's not a stone; it's something else. It's a paycheck or an ATM card or a bank account. He doesn't care. He's going to go out there and try to take them out of that mind frame and elevate them to something spiritual, to level of spirituality. The Rebbe adds, Specifically because he was in the river. He wasn't on the side of the river. He was actually floating in the river. That made him Moshe. That's an amazing thing the Rebbe says. Why did Batya name him Moshe? Because she took him out of the water. His whole name was that he was in the water. His whole identity was a person that was in the actual depth of the issue and dealt with it. As the Torah teaches us from the Alter Rebbe, what does it mean that Moshe Rabbeinu was taken out of the water? He was taken out, like we learned in the Gemara, he was taken out from the first Shemitah, from the first sabbatical. And this elevated Moshe, because Moshe was able to engage the Jewish people, notwithstanding no matter what their situation was. That was his identity. That was his pride. His name was based on that. He was taken out of a place of water. And what kind of water? The waters of Avodah Zarah. So too when it comes to the sheep of Yisrael. Through being a shepherd, and not just any shepherd, a shepherd by Yisrael, God says, this is who I want to be my leader. Notwithstanding that they were sheep of an idol worshiper. He doesn't care. He doesn't say, well, I'm not going to care about the sheep of an idol worshiper. He cares about them. He pays attention. He's sensitive to them. And so too, the Jewish people, notwithstanding of what their level was, he was with them and he took them out of their situation to be able to give them the Torah. And based on what we said before, in Sif Aleph, it's not just a story about the greatness of Moshe. This greatness of Moshe is because that greatness is within each and every one of us. This is also a lesson to us. Not just that, the first lesson the Rebbe says is that you should engage in people, don't be selfish, don't be self-centered, and start with doing a taiva b'gashmis, favor of material, and lead to a favor of beruchnis. Now the Rebbe says even further. Let's say you see something negative in the next person. You say, what? I don't have to do that person. A person shouldn't say and think. Not just that you don't want to do that person, it's not my problem. That's this person's problem. You have to know. The very fact that you see a fault in someone else is directly connected to you. Why? Based on the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. Based on the teaching of the Holy Baal Shem Tov. Al-Pasik, Tisarcha Rayasecha, Shemasha Adam Roya Rab Zulasa Yumitzad Rashaboy. The Baal Shem Tov teaches that if you see bad in someone, it's because you have part of that badness. You wouldn't identify a fault in someone else if that fault wasn't within you as well. Not just any fault, that specific fault. Hidu Asipur, the Rebbe tells the story. Shepam Ra Baal Shem Tov Yehudi Shemchal Shabbos. The Baal Shem Tov once saw a Jew desecrating the Shabbos. The Baal Shem Tov start to right away try to contemplate, how did I even see something like that? Why was I a witness to such an act? So he had to find within himself the problem. Till he remembered that once he asked the Talmud Chacham, a scholar, a Torah scholar, to help him in something, doesn't say what. And the Talmud Chacham is called Shabbos, and he shouldn't have taken advantage, so to say, and asked a Talmud Chacham. We can imagine it was something small, and the Talmud Chacham was more than happy to help the Baal Shem Tov, but Baal Shem Tov felt he shouldn't have taken a favor from a Talmud Chacham, and the Talmud Chacham is called Shabbos. That's like a desecration of Shabbos. The famous story, the very famous story of the Mittel Rebbe, and the Tzemach Tzedek. One time, the Mittel Rebbe was in the middle of conducting private audiences, and he stopped. I think. Over there it says the story that a chassid came to the Mittel Rebbe, and he did a horrible sin. I'm not going to get into the details of the sin, but it was a pretty horrible sin on all levels. And the Mittel Rebbe couldn't continue the private audience, not because he was judging the person. He needed to find that sin within him, and it was such a crazy act that person did. He couldn't find it within him until he sat for a while and felt that when he says Chassidus and people don't listen, it was similar to what that guy did. in the Avera, and then he was able to find the tikkun for that person. But he had to first find it within himself, because the Baal Shem Tov says if you even hear something or see something that someone else is a fault, it's that fault itself is directly connected to you. So the Rebbe says back to us as individuals, if we see something negative in a person, that means that we're related to that negativity itself. So of course you have to engage to help fix it, because you're part of the problem. This is what we learned from Moshe. When there was the decree by Pharaoh that that you have to throw all the children, all the firstborn sons, into the Nile. What does that mean spiritually? To throw Jewish children into the education and the mindset of Avodah Zarah of the Nile. Moshe would think that idea that Jewish children are getting lost to the idol of the Nile, what's that have to do with me? I'm Moshe. I'm not part of that problem. No. That the truth is, why was there that decree in the first place? Why did Paro have an interest to try to corrupt the education and the purity of the Jewish children? It was because he said there's going to one day be a Moshe. His stargazer said there's a Moshe, and he wanted to throw everyone into the Nile. And if he throws everyone into the Nile, he'll also throw Moshe. So it wasn't that Moshe could say it has nothing to do with me because I'm not vulnerable to the Nile of Egypt. You're the cause of the Nile of the problem of the Nile of Egypt. So how could Moshe nullify this decree? Moshe has to get involved. Moshe himself had to be placed in the Nile. This is also the lesson. The Rebbe talks about a discourse. If you want to give criticism, you can't be above, you have to be from within. You have to make yourself equal. When there's a decree on the Chas v'Shalom on the Jewish people, a person must know. You're not disconnected. The very fact that you know about it and you have an awareness to the issue means you're involved. You have to go into the Nile. And to nullify it. Person can't turn an eye and say it has nothing to do with me. It's not my problem, someone else's child. If you know about it, it means not only that you have to take action, you're part of the problem, therefore you have to be part of the solution. If that's the case, that approach of not disengaging yourself of other people's issues is in a way for you to find your own elevation. Because if you're part of the problem, you need an elevation. The famous Talmud that teaches that more than the giver, the balabayis, does with the poor person helps the giver to do something, right? If no one knocked on your door, you wouldn't have the ability to give charity. Let's just go a little further. So the Rebbe then says a Maimer. After the Maimer, this is again the Farbrengen of leading up to the Yahrzeit of the Alter Rebbe, the 150th year. The Rebbe celebrated the 150th year for like 18 months, at least. The Vur Betanya says in Tanya, one of the things that Moshe gave the Jewish people was das, understanding, awareness in God, connection. The Jewish people on their own, even without the addition of Moshe, so to say, are believers, the descendants of believers. It means we believe and we're the descendants of believers, of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Just to believe is not enough. You have to also have das, awareness, connection to what you believe in. Rambam, like the Rambam Maimonides says, which is his Yahrzeit, is also coming up the 20th of Teves, Leida, to know Sheisha Matzarishan, you must know, not just believe, but know that there's an existence, an original existence, which is Hashem. And that's Moshe's job, to give us das. He gives das, like the famous Maimer, the final Maimer the Rebbe gave us before on Purim Katan, was the idea of Moshe Rabbeinu giving das to the Jewish people, giving understanding, a connection, awareness. Or someone who's anti-Moshe, what does that person say? He says or she says, Lo yadayti es Hashem. That's what does Paro say? Paro doesn't say, I don't believe in God. I don't know God. Das. He fights with the das of Moshe. What he argues with Moshe is not that you don't have to believe that there's a God. You don't have to have the das in God. Why do you have to have the awareness? Why does it have to be a reality to you? It's enough just to believe that there's God. Someone who claims that you're a menagid, a person who's an enemy of Moshe. And because Moshe's idea is not just to give belief in God, but to give das in Hashem, to give us an understanding in God and an awareness of God. He was able to nullify the Nile, not just that he nullified the Nile, Batya nullified the Nile, the daughter of Pari. Emunah enough is not able to break an avodah zarah. How could you break an idol? Is you have to have, again, the power of das is not just that you know God. It's a reality. What you know in your chachma and bina, what you believe is your existence. And then you could break the avodah zarah. In primis, you have to internalize it. It's not just your godly soul, because your godly soul was never disconnected. We're talking about your animal soul. That the breaking of your inner avodah zarah, your inner idols, your inner connection to worldly and material things shouldn't come from an overpowerment of the godly soul, but the animal soul itself should break that connection. When Mashiach comes, like it says in Mal'ar's Deis Hashem, that then there's going to be tremendous das when Mashiach comes. Yikum Ayid, we're going to have the prophecy. Everyone's going to turn to serve one God. This is also connected to the Shabbos that we bless the month of Shvat, even though it's not this week, but we're getting ready for the month of Shvat, which is a very important month in Chabad. This is the month the Rebbe took leadership. What to us is the important date in Shvat, as Chassidim, is the 10th of Shvat. 10th of Shvat is the passing of the previous Rebbe in 1950, and also the day the Rebbe accepted leadership in 1950, and then officially in 51. And the Rebbe says specifically this year, meaning 1963, Shishnas Hakan, which is 150 years, is Talkus Rabbeinu Zaken, to the passing of the Alter Rebbe. So Inyan Echad, because the Rebbe says that by Rebbes, it's not there's one Rebbe and another Rebbe and another Rebbe. It's not a hamshacha, it's not a chain of the light, it's the chain of the luminary, the Mor. And a Mor is only one. It may come in a different body, it may come in a different time, it may come in a different hat, in a strimal or in a down hat. The Rebbe said once, it's the same person. It's kul echad, because the Mor, a source of light, is one. What did the Alter Rebbe want? The Alter Rebbe did not want to start a club, a group of Chabadniks that learn Chassidus. That was not his idea. That every Yid should learn Torah Chassidus. Every Yid should learn Pnimis Torah, the inner secrets of Torah. And when was that starting to be actualized, the Rebbe said? It was specifically by the previous Rebbe, and even more so, of course, by the Rebbe. And because we're getting closer to the days of the Mashiach, and as the Baal Shem, and Mashiach told the Baal Shem Tov that the condition for Mashiach to come is that the wellsprings of Chassidus have to be spread. Therefore, every generation, it's not something that stays equal. It continues and it grows. The teachings of Chassidus. Just go a little further. There's someone who may say, everything 40 years ago was good, 20 years ago was good, 30 years ago was good. Why do we have to keep on changing? I did enough. Who? That person may claim. Now let someone else take the job. I worked hard in my youth. Let someone else be the spring of water. I love the das. You must know. You're right. Like Mordechai tells Esther, salvation will come from somewhere else. It's going to happen one way or the other. Mashiach has to come. We can't hold it up anymore. Because in order for Mashiach to come, we need to spread the wellsprings of Chassidus. It's going to happen. But you're not going to be part of the story. If you're not active and continuing to be a person who's helping to spread the wellsprings of Chassidus, it's going to happen without you. But you're not going to be part of the story. Yisrael the Rebbe says more than that. If that's what's demanded from a person, he or she to be a person who's carrying the spring. You can't say that you don't have the power to do it. I don't have the ability. If God wants you to do it, it means He gives you the power to do it. So if you're not doing it, besides the fact that you're not being active, there's something worse here. God empowered you with strength, and you're not utilizing it. So why did God give you the power? Saying that God did a wasteful act? You're part of a problem here. All right, everyone, this is a beautiful Farbrengen. Yes, Aaron.
Okay, just two things. One comment, I feel that this teaching is they're using it to prove the fact that you guys who go out to the ends of the world where there might only be one person who's Jewish. This is the Torah part that explains it. And number two is you mentioned he could come in any hat. Could he come with just the yarmulke or nothing?
You talking Mashiach?
Well, you're saying the guy who's coming is coming with a hat, and then you mentioned it could be this kind of hat or that kind of hat. But what if it's not a hat at all?
You don't need a hat to spread to be a carrier of the spring. You just need to carry the spring.
Okay, but am I right?
Garments are important up to a point.
Okay. Now my other thing, was I right about my statement? This is what he used to keep you guys going to the end of the world?
This is one of the teachings, yes.
Okay,
Laila Tov, everyone, and good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.